Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And it's lovely that a lot of you have been here, I know, through the afternoon, because I think both of the previous panels feed a lot into why we're here. My name is Karen James. This is not Simon Manda. Simon, unfortunately, was not able to get here for financial reasons. He wasn't able to get support to come down, which is very sad, and something we'll speak about a bit later. But very kindly, another member of Dawn is here with me. So thank you very much for being here. So we're here today to talk to you about the Disabled Audiovisual Workers Network. We launched in Durban at DFM. This is our Cape Town launch. So we're very new, we're starting, but we wanted to start. We wanted to begin to put one foot in front of the other. The idea of Dawn began, in fact, in the first frame week when Simon and I met and realized we had a very shared passion for this work. And then we were completely unaware of each other, and I think that was an important thing. We started to talk, we started to connect, and there are so many people doing incredible work and activism in this space. And one of the things we quickly realized was, let's stop doing it separately, let's start doing it together. Let's start talking about who's already out there, what are people already doing, how do we connect, how do we have the same conversation and divide and conquer. So my personal interest, I am autistic. Half my family is autistic and have a number of other disabilities. I also am losing my sight. That's going to be gone completely at some point soon. And I'm busy doing my PhD in autistic representation on television. But trying to, generally speaking, build models for disability representation. But that is commercial and mainstream, and I don't see that these things need to be in competition. That's kind of my personal challenge, is how do we make content that sells, that people want to watch, that's entertaining, that's great TV, but that at the same time is able to do authentic, excellent representation of people with disabilities. So then last year, we were part of a panel, one of the first panels, and meant to talk about these kinds of discussions. And we finally said, let's bite the bullet, let's launch Dawn, which is first and foremost a network. So we're trying to bring together people already working in the industry who are people with disabilities. We're also trying to interest industry bodies, producers, production companies, broadcasters, funding bodies in the work that we're doing and why it should matter to them. And I think South Africa is very behind the curve on this, and I think that in a couple of years, seeing what's happening internationally, things in South Africa are going to catch up with that, and people are going to realize, oh, we should have been doing this a long time ago. So our sort of core focus areas are around representation, what is on our screens, are around accessibility to the industry and within the industry for people with disabilities. And then it's around job creation and funding, and the fact that often people with disabilities have additional restrictions to just existing. And also, to attend something like this for a lot of people is a lot harder because of access, because you maybe need a companion, because you maybe need an assistant. So all of those costs just sort of get exponentially higher. I'm going to chat a little bit about representation and why it matters. I'm assuming kind of if you're here, you already believe what we believe. You're already part of the cause. Then I'm going to hand over to Ron to talk a little bit more about being in the industry as a person with disability. But I think even when I began looking into representation, I was quite surprised, really, the impact that it has. A lot of the studies that are out there, for example, look at the representation of the LGBTQI community over a number of years. And what began as sort of small, perhaps stereotyped representation grew into more detailed and nuanced representation, and also had a real impact on people's mindsets. So polls that were taken would show, 10 years ago, this many people were opposed to gay marriage, for example. Now that percentage is far lower, and one of the main things people cite is seeing that on television. A number of people in the US, when they voted for Barack Obama, said the reason they'd done that is, oh, they'd seen Denzel Washington to be president, and oh, it's fine, a black man can be president, that's not a scary thing. And so that representation really matters. But the quality of that representation really matters, because the dangerous side of that is that when things are represented badly, people take that to be true. People take that to be accurate. You know, so if we see a stereotypical representation of a woman on TV, we know enough women in our lives that we can go, well, that's clearly very stereotypical and that's clearly not the whole truth. But if you, for example, see for the first time a person with a disability on TV and that's your only reference point, you're often going to assume that to be true and accurate because you don't have those other reference points around you. So specifically within autism, you see a lot of times teachers, for example, assume they know what autistic people are like because they've seen them on TV, and then when they have actual autistic children in their class in front of them, they treat them a certain way, or they have certain expectations about them, maybe very low expectations about them, for example, which can actually be really detrimental to like the real life lived experience of people with disabilities. So there's a genuine impact that representation has also on how people feel about themselves, and that's the other thing that the research has shown time and time again. If you only show, for example, a person with disability who is incapable, who needs support, or for example, is really unloved, or is a burden on the family, people start to internalize those messages. They start to believe them about themselves. So that's why the nature of the representation we're seeing is really important. And my favorite warning story about representation is that in the US, a lot of people, when they sign up to be organ donors or say, no, I don't want to be an organ donor, and they ask them why, a lot of people say they don't want to be organ donors because they've watched Grey's Anatomy and they don't trust doctors anymore. So representation has a real life impact on all of us. So that is a cause that's very dear to my heart, and that's a big thing that we as Dawn want to take forward with the broadcasters, with the funders, to ensure that there's more representation across the board. And for me, the way we do that is by having people in creative positions who have writers, directors, producers. They're going to make meta content. If you don't have those, you bring in consultants. So we want to build databases, make those available to people to go, hey, consult with us, make sure you're doing this representation with us. We want to encourage writers, we want to encourage people to just open up their thinking about what representation can look like. So that, as came up a bit in the previous panel, you know, people with disabilities can love and be parents and solve crimes and, you know, do all the other fun things that people on TV get to do. Their existence doesn't need to be defined by their disability. So that's one of the missions, and Verona, I'm going to hand over to you to talk about access and accommodation.
Okay, no problem. Hi guys. So Dawn essentially, I mean, what we're looking to do is everything that's spoken on the previous panel. I'm not sure if how many of you guys were at the previous panel. Dawn is looking to embody those things, and the changes that we want to make. I mean, we want to be at the table with the change makers, with the needle movers, with the people that make these decisions, that make policies, that all these different things. We want to be there because it's a waterfall. When we realize it is a waterfall when it comes to representation, I mean, why representation is so important is because in day-to-day life we function by assumption, or educated guesses for most of the decisions we make, or how we treat people, or how we talk to people. And why it's important is because of the point of reference for all of us. So meeting a disabled person, you don't understand how to speak to them or whether to talk to them, or you're afraid to because of the point of reference is you have no point of reference. You have no understanding. So it comes down to, from the content itself, is our easiest point of reference is what we watched, what we've seen. So if you meet something you don't know, you're going to think automatically to what you've seen. Have you watched a movie? Have you watched a film? Have you watched a documentary or something that this person falls within? Like you meet someone from a different country, you start thinking about the different cities in that country, what you know about it, what you know about the cuisine, to enter a conversation. But with a disabled person or person living with a disability, you have no point of reference. So you're afraid already, and you're excluding them automatically. And it comes down to the representation, and then
from a behind the scenes perspective, having people with disabilities consulting on these projects to best represent those people living with a disability. So it is a waterfall that falls all the way down, and it stems from Dawn being able to have the opportunity to put those people in place, consultants, policy changes, all these different things. So that's our goal. And as a filmmaker and stuff, it's you realize that more opportunities for disabled filmmakers will have more people of disabilities in the industry, then they can affect the stories that are being told. It's a numbers game. The amount of us that are in the industry are quite slim, and people are afraid to enter the industry, because they don't see opportunity for them. They don't see where they can earn an income and all these different things. So from a participant in the industry, Dawn is very important, and it was much needed.
Yeah. Um, and I think that that's an interesting question because I think there probably are a number of people in the industry. I know there are a number of people in the industry with disabilities. Something that came up again on the previous panel was sometimes people have shame about talking about that. And so perhaps they don't always want to identify in that way. And also because they don't want to be confined by that sometimes. So that's interesting conversations to have around stigma, about when do people want to out themselves as being a person with a disability in terms of the invisible disabilities. Obviously, this is a broad community of people, and I think that's another important thing to always talk about when we talk about people with disabilities. It's vast, and the needs of the community are very varied. So as has come up this afternoon, there's sign language, there's closed captioning, there's audio description. When we think of an audience, those are aspects of accessibility. When we're within the industry, we need to talk about how do we make our sets accessible for people. How do we make accommodations if we have actors or we have crew that are people with disabilities? How do we make events like this accessible? Something like this is important for us as an industry to come, to network, to pitch, to do all of these things. And there's constant sort of questions that are being raised that we need to still find answers to. I'm working with a filmmaker who has a very marked stutter. And he doesn't know how to pitch his projects. The environment that has been created for pitches is you stand up and you sell, and that's not a thing he can do. The more pressure that is placed on him, the less able he is to speak. That doesn't mean his film is any less valid. That doesn't mean his ideas are any less valid. But how do we problem solve around that as an industry? And I think I always come back to the more inclusive we are, the better we're going to be, the more interesting our stories are going to be. We're not doing this as a... Disability inclusion should never be as a charity or a shame or anything else like that. It is going, wow, we're an important part of this society, we're an important part of this world, and we have great ideas, and we have fun things, and we have so much to add. And so I think that mindset shift is also part of what we're looking to do. That it's not an extra on the side. We often see this as women, right? When Women's Month happens, and then people want everything about women to happen in August, and we go, guys, we exist in all 12 months of the year, not only in 1 month of the year. And so again, yes, creating content that's focused on disability is fantastic. But where is the inclusion happening across the board and more broadly speaking? I really want to kind of open the conversation to you guys. I want to go on to say we have a QR code you can come scan with us if you want to sign up. The website is coming soon, but it's dawn.africa. And you can also go there and just sign up and get added to the mailing list. Some of the things that we've already seen happen since our Durban launch, which was very recent, I had a producer approach me to say, I'm shooting a documentary in Cape Town. Do you have crew with disabilities that we can bring on board? I'm speaking with a casting agent about building up a database because often we get told oh, there aren't people out there. There are. It might be difficult to find them, and so we're going to try and go, how can we make that easier? How can we make that more accessible? We're speaking to people about on-set training, and we're trying to connect with a lot of industry bodies, and a lot of people are very eager to have this conversation. I really think there's a lot of openness to it, because people don't know, and I think the first step is asking the question, is going, how can we? How can we be more accessible? How can we better accommodate people with disabilities within the industry? But I'd really like to know if there's anyone who has a question or a comment or who wants to join this conversation with us, because we're networking. That's what we're here to do. Yeah.
Hi. Firstly, this is really amazing, really cool. As someone who has a lot of people in their life who suffer from disabilities, this is really amazing to see. I wanted to ask, as a young student filmmaker, what do you think are ways that we can make our sets more accessible to people with more mental disabilities, such as autism or ADHD? And while I don't think a lot of people classify, depression and anxiety as a disability, but I think it falls into this kind of conversation, accommodating for people in that kind of space.
Absolutely. I think one of the first ways to make sets accessible for this, and I've just experienced this, I've just been on a big production where we had a couple of cast members. The first one is letting them know that they can talk to you. And so we've kind of been talking to people about going, even if you're signing crew up, if you can add a line on your form that says, do you have some kind of disability? Do you have any needs that you might want to speak to us about? And you can even specify those. Make it easy for people to know you're approachable, first of all. And they might be able to be very clear with you. They might be able to say, what I need, maybe as a cast member, I need a completely quiet space before I come on set. I need 10 minutes. After the makeup artist, after costume, I need 10 minutes just of silence with myself before I can come onto your set. That might be something that people need to know. I had cast members that literally just wanted their fidget things with them until the last possible minute. It's a very easy thing to accommodate, and to make them feel comfortable to just talk to you about that is a very helpful thing. We also, on our productions, make available to cast and crew, if anything is triggering in terms of content, that we will provide access to a psychologist for them to speak to. And we advertise that proactively to everybody. And where possible, we have sort of online sessions beforehand to go, okay, guys, maybe in a season we shot a few years ago, there's a lot of domestic violence in this show. We want to talk about that. We want to talk about the fact that watching this might be triggering for people with mental health issues, for example. So to create the environment where people go, yes, we can talk about this, yes, we can be open to this. To create the environment where if you have a crew member who's having a panic attack, they feel okay coming to tell you, I'm going to need 10 minutes, without worrying about I might lose my job over this, or I need to hide this, or I need to feel ashamed about this. So I think that's really kind of the starting point for that. And in terms of physical disability, I'm just going to move on to say, I think it's really important to just think about these things when you're scouting, when you're looking at locations. How easy is it physically to get to that set? Even if you're working with older actors, for example, how can we make seating available for them? How can we give people a little bit of a breather? And a lot of the accessibility things that we do for people with disabilities, everybody enjoys. Everybody feels great. Oh, let's take 5 minutes between takes. Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're all going to feel better and have a better day.
I think it comes, from my end, I think it comes down to culture. In terms of you as a either producer or director, the culture you're setting within not only your set, but within pre-prod, within development, all these things. I think if your team has an understanding that we need to accommodate or we need to think about this, it's just thinking about, honestly, as an artist, thinking about it and giving that thought process to the rest of your team, then you will figure out ways. I mean, what essentially with that specifically is, that's what Dawn is aiming to be. Is you can contact someone from Dawn, and they could assist you because, like you said, like you might not understand what to do, and we can sort of navigate with you and assist you and consult with you on that matter. But it comes down to culture, I think, is like especially with like because like the shame thing, as much as you can put in like on a form or something that you can disclose whatever. Some people aren't because there's a lot of admin for them. It's a lot of extra. And they're going to think you're going to have assumptions about them and they have to explain themselves and all these different things. I think it's just culture, how you present yourself as a filmmaker, outside of even disability, it comes to like LGBTQ and all these different things. Is the culture you set and the mindset that your crew has, and your producer specifically is. Because if you present yourself in a way that's accommodating and makes them comfortable, comfort is a huge thing. You can only, as a professional, you can be as effective as you can if you are most comfortable to participate, to work, So that's how you can maximize your crew as well as getting opinions from people that you hire with disabilities. Ask their opinions and stuff. It's going to educate you for your further productions, for even your other colleagues. You'll educate them through this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to do is create that opportunity for you guys to access us and we can assist and
Yeah.
navigate you.
There's a question over here. Can you get the mic?
My name's David Max Brown. I work at AFTA, the film school. I'm so sorry because I really wanted to be here at the beginning of this and I got waylaid on my way over. But so I missed the beginning. But we have, obviously quite a few students coming through our program who have disabilities. And what I'm thinking about is the thing you were just saying about confidence. I have students who come out. One I'm thinking of who's happens to be a paraplegic. Then they have I know that they have a great script, right? It's in their pocket, but they're so shy to actually show it to anyone. Even though they might have even made a great film while they're at school, and you can see this is a director, writer, actor actually, but then that sort of hesitancy to actually take it out their pocket and show it to someone, will you be doing that at all, like to sort of work as almost like an agency in that way, to be able to say, we can represent you as a writer, or we can represent you as a director, we can help other people to understand that even though they don't want to take a minute to even look at the short film you've made because they just look at you and they think, nah, not possible. It sometimes helps to have that sort of representation,
I mean, I think that's such an important point, and I think that's an important down the line goal. I think certainly, part of what can happen quite quickly is once you begin networking with other people and you start to see, for example, award-winning filmmakers who are wheelchair users, then you start to maybe shift some of that perception and you feel less alone, because I think often a person with disability can feel quite exposed or quite isolated, or like they need to somehow be representative of everybody with that disability as opposed to just being a human. But the other thing I hope that we will be able to facilitate are, for example, specific pitching sessions where everyone is geared to the fact that you're going to be hearing pitches from people with disabilities, and maybe that might involve different things. So maybe that's going to involve a silent pitch from somebody, and maybe that's going to involve, and so getting the industry to go, you need to come meet us halfway, but you're walking into an environment that maybe feels already a bit more inviting, where you've been directly asked to come and be, as well as certainly what we can be doing is advocating with the existing agents to make them aware. And as I say, I've spoken already to a couple of casting agents. It's definitely a conversation we're going to be taking on with PMA, with Saga, and with the writers' agents, directors' agents, to say there's a client I really think that you should look at, and they might involve a little bit more drive on your side, but there's something really worthwhile there. And so hopefully we can play that kind of connecting role. yeah, within the industry, and I'd love to, you know, maybe we can also come chat with your students, because I think that, again, the idea of just feeling like you do belong in this industry is for you. When we had our Durban launch, a colleague of mine was doing an interview on the radio about the launch, and the radio interviewer asked the question, how does the industry feel about you forcing this on them? And we're going, we're not forcing anything onto, we can't, how can we? People with disabilities are generally not able to force a lot, guys. Already you've got two autistic people up here talking in public in a very sensory, crazy environment.
It's the most ironic thing in the world.
We're doing
I
a
swear
lot,
to God.
guys. We're working hard. We're not trying to force anything. We're trying to say, A, we're already here. You may be just not seeing and hearing us or giving us the space that we need and deserve because we're awesome. B, in the same way that the industry has evolved around racial representation, around representation of women, is evolving and still needs to evolve more around LGBTI plus inclusion. This needs to happen. People with disabilities live in this country. It's hard to get exact numbers. Around 10% of our population are people with disabilities, and over 60, around 30% of our population are people with disabilities. I was on a panel in Durban with Dr. Shelley Barry, and she made the point that disability is the one minority group that we all might become a part of in our lifetime. Okay, we're not going to suddenly change race or change gender, but you might suddenly find yourself disabled. As you get older, we kind of pretty much all find ourselves disabled in certain ways. And so this is a conversation that really should include all of us. And I think that's another part of Dawn, is going, people with disabilities have been doing this. We'd really love it if everyone else came to join us in this conversation and came to help us and went like, yeah, this benefits us all. This doesn't only benefit the people with disabilities. It really benefits all of us.
I mean, you're a lot more kinder than me, because I think it's be somewhat forced. But it's fascinating because you, speaking as an AFTA representative, we talk about education in terms of making change, you know? I mean, there's a classic Mandela quote. But when it comes to universities, that's where I think a lot of change would come from. Because like we have a student, and if there was within sort of the filmmaking courses and these sort of things where we have now, what's the term? Sex scenes and stuff. What's the term? Sorry.
Intimacy coordinator.
Intimacy coordinators. That's mandated. That's very, very important in this industry, and we promote it a lot. The same can be attributed to accessibility for people with disabilities, and it should be just as important. So the university should actually start implementing this, because we'll have a new generation who have a basic understanding of this, first of all, but can instill a passion in this, you know? And our youth is so important in this industry, and unfortunately sometimes it can seem like there's a big generation gap in our filmmakers, you know, and different thought processes, different ways about going about content and stuff. So I think a good entryway is through universities, and sort of it being mandated that they do talk about it. That is important, you know. But it's a very, hopefully we are in a space in the future, because it will take a lot of time to get that, because there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put in by organizations, by people, all these different things. But that's what the goal should be, and it should be not forced. I mean, it's a very aggressive term. But the industry needs to take it more seriously. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we've spoken to people about it, and they are very interested. I spoke to the minister last night about it, and they're very interested about these things, because it's important. You know, we are artists as well, and the idea of just allowing people to be marginalized and it being an afterthought, you know, we consider those things for race and stuff, and it's very important. For gender, it's very important, 100%. But people that have a natural inability to do things, you know, it's very important that they have support, and hopefully we're in a space where we can give that support, sir, you know.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question or a comment for us? Yeah. At the back, and then we'll come to you here in front after that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question is, I would love to hear from you maybe a little bit more of the work that you're doing with government funders and government organizations, just because I've been quite disappointed where I've actually approached them for a project about neurodivergency and someone who has a really incredible journey of finding out that they are autistic. And no matter how many doors I knocked on to try and find other filmmakers with disabilities to bring into the project, these various government funders could not point me in the direction of one person, and that's personal meetings, that's emails, that's phone calls, and it's quite terrible because they also on their score sheets and stuff they ask for you to include these people, but we're trying our best, but there's no from their side there's absolutely no assistance. I would love to hear the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. So, and that database that you're talking about is one of the first things that we as Dawn want to get up there, to say, here are people working in the industry, here are people who can be consultants for you, who can work on your films, who can work on your projects, who know and understand the industry. That work I've been doing kind of more personally, and we now will be aggressively doing, forcing as Dawn, now that we have more of an industry body. But I just, as an industry professional, have been sitting on a number of funding panels. And I have time and time again been the voice going, if this project is about this, where is the person with disability who's part of the creative team? And I've pushed that to the point of going, if you are going to fund this project, they must employ. And that for me is one of the key things that I want to get through with the funders, is to go, if there is going to be a person with disability represented on screen, you must be employing a person with disability in the creative team as a consultant. You must be casting that authentically. And yes, that is possible, and yes, we can show you. We want to make things easy for people. We want to have a contractual clause that says, this is how you should handle employees with disabilities. Add it to your contracts, please. So we have, legal and representatives who will be looking at that for us. So the NFVF has, last year, for the first time, put out a call for development for filmmakers with disabilities. They did consult with Simon and I on that. They didn't take all of our recommendations, but they took some of them, and it's a starting point, and I think there is a willingness there. I again always believe we need to approach these things from two sides. So on the one hand, development for short films about disabilities made by disabled filmmakers is essential. On the other hand, we need people with disabilities in soap operas. We need people with disabilities in our mainstream movies. So we need both. We need to be working on both sides of that. So yes, we are actively meeting ongoing conversations. KZN has had many panels in the past in terms of their funding. I know they've also now recently restructured, so there's other conversations happening there. And again, I think there's a willingness, and they're really kind of going, please tell us, because we don't know. And the other aspect of that is, as well as additional funding, great, fantastic, how do we make our current funding calls make sure that they're inclusive? How do we make sure that we are giving people with disabilities priority? As you say, it's one of those check boxes, but often you know that those check boxes are interns. They're not directors, they're not producers, they're not writers, they're not stars. Very seldom, of course, sometimes they are, but very seldom are they. And so we don't want to be a checkbox. We want to be really going, how do you, in the same way that there's a real effort being made, which is a good thing, to prioritize filmmakers from the underserved provinces. And that's something they've been able to do quite effectively, and make sure that, we're going to give priority to filmmakers from the Northern Cape or Limpopo because there's so few of them and that industry needs support. Again, how are we going to give priority to filmmakers with disabilities, especially those key creatives in those key roles? And likewise, an engagement with broadcasters to say, you guys are in a position to mandate certain things. you guys are in a position to go back to your producers and say, why don't you include a character with disability? And to go that there are so many characters, this is another important point for me. If the character's function in your story is to be a teacher, there can be an actor with a disability. It doesn't need to be that the character is specifically scripted that way. We can just be more inclusive with our casting in the same way that, again, we've kind of learned to do that racially. We've learned to do that from a gender perspective. We can learn to do that from a disability perspective. So keep knocking at those doors, join us, and we are in active conversations with the NFEF. There was a conversation here, yes, there was a conversation here.
Hi, my name is Lerato. I'm with the South African Screen Federation. He stole the words out of my mouth. But I just want to correct one thing. Disability is mandatory through the BEE codes that were enacted by government. So our role here is to make sure there's enforcement. So that's what we need to work on, and also to increase those
Yes.
those quotas that they have put in that legislation. But it is mandatory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything else he's
No,
taken over.
And thank you for speaking up, because we're meeting tomorrow. So these conversations with industry bodies are happening, and absolutely. And again, I think there's often questions about, if something is mandated, is it across all broadcasters? As we get into digital media, often people are maybe not believing that the legislation is about them. And as you say, how do we enforce, and how do we increase, and how do we also look at, beyond a quota, the nature of the representation? What kind of quality of representation are we getting? That's the next layer of that conversation.
I think that's what we were trying to mean is enforcement should be mandated to enforce this properly. There's no point in having something that's there if it's not done well or done properly. Then it's invisible. You know what I mean? It doesn't have. So I think that's our thing, is just having whatever concerning people with disabilities that is done by the right people. It's people that understand it, and the people that can actually assist. And a big thing is also just promoting an environment that few people feel confident, that we spoke about before, but that they feel like they can enter the industry and these sort of things. That's the key thing, I guess.
The other question that I hope one day somebody will be able to answer, and this happens over and over again. A few years ago, I was at DFM, and there was a presentation on a big study that had been done into sexual harassment in the film industry, and there was one man in the audience, and everyone else was women. And this afternoon, I've said there's been a couple of panels. There was a panel about accessible technology. There was a panel about diverse storytelling. There's this now. And we so love that you are all here, but I know that you're already with us. I know that you already support our cause. I know that you already care about what we're here to do. How do we really properly mainstream these conversations? It's an ongoing question that I have. How do we really properly get the big players to be part of these conversations and to care about them? Yeah.
I think a big thing is getting people to care about it is such a fascinating thing, because as we can see, we have not the numbers we'd like here. We have the seats we'd like to be filled, and it's all about figuring out how can we get those people in those seats, But I think a lot of it has to come down to the fact of we are here as just a singular organization. There's no other big names that are attached to this, so people won't come and attend. And we need that support. You need the support from the higher ups, And we're hoping that we'll have that interest, but not only that is just conversations. We need to have conversations with each other, but it's a discussion that needs to be had, We learn so much from each other, And we just want people to be interested in talking about it, with us or with other people,
Absolutely. Yes.
What I will say, this is less of a question, more of a comment, I suppose, on what you just said. As someone who is like coming into the film industry as a very young person to this industry as well, I think that it's changing a lot. I can say that I haven't been on many sets, but a set that I was on this year, the head of directing, and he was a director for the majority of the project that we were working on. He's an autistic person. One of our lead actresses is an autistic person, and it's very much like a conversation that we're like having on set. This talk has made me realize we need to be doing even more, that we need to like include people with that's why I asked my question about specifically people with mental disabilities, because that's all I have any experience with.
Yeah.
But we need to include these people. But I do just want to say, I think that with at least my generation, it's becoming much more of a thing of, because I think most people that I know have no problem saying that autistic people can do anything that a neurotypical person can do. And so I think that it is becoming more widely agreed upon that this isn't an issue and it should be put out there. But I think telling the stories is what we need to start doing, and putting those people out there into the world.
I absolutely agree with that, and I do think that there's a different generational way of thinking coming through. And I think, as I say, globally, I think these conversations are happening much faster than they are happening here. The other point I do want to make is, and I say this with all respect for the platform that we've been given and the space that we've been given, and the fact that essentially a whole afternoon has been given over to conversations. I'm very grateful for that. There's also an ongoing question about how accessible events like this are and can be. So, for example, when we had a panel last year to talk about this, I paid for the sign language interpreter because FAME could not afford to do that. Earlier on a panel, there was an interpreter because somebody on the panel needed that, which was wonderful. Wouldn't it be great if we had those interpreters at every single panel that's happening here? And if you make that known to the deaf community, you can come. You will be able to follow along. We are making this accessible to you. If there was more access given in terms of if people need a large printed program, if people need a Braille program, if people need a guide to navigate them through the venue, and it's always this kind of chicken and egg thing. Because things aren't accessible, a lot of people with disabilities don't come, and then people don't see the need to make things accessible because they feel like there's not enough of an audience, there's not enough of a need for it. So that's another thing, and again, just the sensory nature of this is wild. And so, to have a quiet, dark room for people who need that, for people who need to have a breakaway from this kind of experience. All of these things are ongoing conversations, and that are things that we're going to keep bringing up, because that would be the dream, is to see a time where, especially your biggest, most popular panels, how otherwise, if we can't have the interpreters here all the time, can we have subtitling on the screens? That's perhaps a far easier technological aspect that we can look at. So these are ongoing conversations. And again, it's difficult because often it means the people who need those accessibility are not here. And so we time and time again go, oh, it's not needed then.
So it's a very interesting predicament, because like with this panel and this session and the session prior, we didn't have any sort of industry representatives here. There's a lot of different industry representatives from commissions and stuff like this that aren't here. I mean, from our own commission, the KZN Film Commission, there's nobody here, And it's an interesting situation, because like Simon should be here. I mean, I'm grateful that I'm here, but but Simon should be here, but he's not here because he wasn't given the support he needed to talk about something that, if we be very honest, wasn't seen as valuable enough to sponsor him for. We have to look at it very simply. And for myself, I was here as a speaker and a previous panel, and I wasn't given support by either the KZN Film Commission or the Durban Film Office. It wasn't seen as valuable. But like we said, we're trying to build a culture, build an environment where people take this actually seriously. Like, I shouldn't have needed to do this on my own. I should have been supported because it's worthwhile. But if this was another topic, I might have been funded. You know what I mean? So it's stuff like this we do actually need to talk about, because as much as us talking about it and the fact that we're grateful for MIP for having us here and giving us a platform, we can't just have gratitude. We have to be honest about the situation, and the fact is, we can't have this happen again. I've become very aggressive on this topic, especially with Karen, because this can never happen again. Someone like Simon should be given the support needed to come here. It should not be a discussion. There are people here that are here for fun, that have been supported and funded and sponsored. We have to be very honest about that. Because if we keep quiet, will there be any change? You know? But
Yeah.
stuff like this is very tricky, because for our industry, everything is about relationships. Everything is about keeping everyone happy.
Well,
But,
and,
yeah.
and also, everything's about money.
True.
Right? That's another important thing. Are there any further questions before we finish off today? Okay. Yes, there we go.
Sorry, I just wanted to go back to what you said before about the possibility of, without a sign language interpreter, having like subtitles on the screen for people. And I just had the thought: has there ever been a conversation about, and this is random, but using AI to maybe help with that?
I mean, absolutely. Look, I attended a disability conference earlier this year where every presentation, Google has it, guys, Google Slides will put the text on screen for you while you talk. It's very simple software to use. It's very simple to set up. They might not be perfect, for sure. They might mess up people's names. There might be some words they get wrong. They might not understand all of our accents perfectly. But it's a start. It's a starting point. And it's an easy, cheap, affordable thing to do. So absolutely. I think it's important, and it's a conversation that we should have. And I will say, by the way, the headsets are great. Okay, I will say that for sure. The headsets that are available here are fantastic. They're very helpful if you're needing to focus or if you're having issues hearing. So it's a wonderful thing. But yes, I believe that subtitling. You don't need to look at our faces. I mean, one of us is not even here. You don't need to be looking at our faces for the whole time we're talking. We're here. You can see these faces. We could have subtitles up there right now. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. I'm going to encourage you all again to sign up. Come find us. We'll show you a QR code you can scan, or go to dawn.africa. Very easy. 2 words. That's why we went for the catchy acronym, guys, because you'll remember us. We learned from Swift. We went with Dawn, so you'll remember us. And come and find us, and come and talk about AFTA. And yeah, we're going to be hopefully back next year to tell you what we're doing, what we have done. And this is very much about doing things together. It's a network. It's about going, oh, what's a project you can take on for this community? What's an aspect that you can take on? Maybe you can start a student movement. So yeah, that's what we're here for. So thank you, Varun.
Thank you, guys.